His Tinder profile proclaimed he was 45, though he appeared no older than his early 30s. Seeking a sugar baby, $700 weekly, no sex required. It sounded like a fairy tale, but as a financially strapped university student, I was prepared to take a risk. I swiped right, and Tinder promptly revealed it was a match. His message arrived almost instantaneously. "Hey there, sweetheart." I grimaced at the term. I loathed it, but $700 was $700, so I swallowed my distaste and replied, "Hey." His name was Jack, and he mentioned that he owned the business, though he was vague about the nature of his work. We conversed for a while before he asked for my Venmo to send the initial payment. Minutes later, the notification arrived. I stared at the $700, unable to believe it was real, expecting to wake up from a dream at any moment, but it wasn't a dream. "You still there?" I clicked on the message. "Yeah, sorry. If you don't mind me asking, what are you looking for in return?" I watched the chat until he responded, "I'm just looking for you to do a few favors for me." That felt like a red flag. Like what? "For starters, I need you to pick up a delivery for me." That seemed innocent enough, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a catch. $700 to retrieve a package. Even I wasn't that naive. From the post office or something? No, I'll send you the address. But I'd rather not do this through Tinder. Do you have Keck, or can you give me your number? Keck, what was this, 2011? I opted to give him my number instead, and he immediately texted me the address, followed by directions to his house where I was to drop off the package. I'm not home right now, but there's a key under the blue flower pot near the door. Enter and place the package on the coffee table in the living room. Make sure you lock the door when you go inside, and then lock it again when you leave. I grabbed my car keys and wallet, entered the address into Google Maps, and drove off. Guide, on my way. My phone buzzed as I backed out of my driveway. "I'm serious. Lock the door, bibliotheque times, please." I thought that was a bit excessive, but I assured him I would. The house looked deserted. A broken chain link fence surrounded it, with a small gate barely hanging on. It stood out like a sore thumb among the nicer homes in the area. "You here for Jack's stuff?" I looked up to see a man standing in the open doorway. He was enormous, both in height and muscle, his torso covered in tattoos. Yeah, I guess," I replied, frozen in place on the sidewalk. "Stay right there," he ordered. I obeyed. I don't think I could have moved even if he had asked me to. I glanced around and realized there was no one else on the street. I was a 21-year-old woman alone. I gripped my car keys tighter. A few minutes later, the man reappeared, carrying a cardboard box about the size of a shoebox, stained and damp in some corners. "Can you open your car?" he asked. I opened the trunk, not wanting it on my seats, and he placed the box inside. "All right, there you go," he said. "Thanks," I replied. I walked to the driver's side and opened the door. "Oh, and one more thing," he called out. I looked at him. "Watch out," he warned. I didn't respond. I cranked up my music as I drove to Jack's house, hoping it would drown out my anxiety. It didn't. I parked in the stone driveway and lingered in the car, admiring the house. It was enormous, with stone pillars on the front porch and the greenest grass I'd ever seen. I turned off the car and got out, retrieved the package, and walked to the front door, finding the key exactly where he said it would be. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and closed it behind me. I remembered his insistence on locking the door twice. It seemed over the top, but as I stared at the closed door, something compelled me to lock it. The inside of the house was just as impressive. Thick maroon carpet cushioned my steps, and all the furniture was wooden and looked extremely expensive. The cost to furnish this place could probably pay for my education several times over. I set the package on the coffee table and started to leave, but then I heard a phone ringing from somewhere in the house. I froze. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out to check. Don't answer any calls that aren't from Marvin. I put my phone away and followed the sound of the ringing, peeking into several rooms before finding the phone in an office. I walked over to the desk and looked at the caller ID. Incoming call from Jack. That was strange. I checked the message again. I was starting to feel uneasy. so I decided not to answer and left the house, locking the door behind me. I've done a few more favors for Jack since then. I once drove a BMW to a random park in another city, only to switch to a different car and drive it back to Jack's house. Another time, I met one of his employees for lunch, who handed me a briefcase to deliver to the first house I had visited, warning me that he would know if I opened it. On several occasions, Jack asked me to go to that same house and stay with a guy named Julio for a set period. In total, I've made around $3,500. Most recently, Jack requested that I spend the night at his house. I woke up to a text from him. "I need you to spend the night at my house." I had never met him in person, though we had spoken on the phone a few times. He assured me he would pay $1,000 for the night, as long as I followed a few specific rules. I arrived at his house that evening. The driveway was empty, as usual, but the porch light was on. I walked up, unlocked the door, entered, and locked it again. The interior was unchanged. Jack had told me over the phone that he would leave a list of rules on the dining room table. I set my things down in the living room, my bags looking out of place among the fancy furniture. I wandered into the kitchen and then to the dining room. Sure enough, there was a piece of paper on the table, held down by an empty glass. "Lock the door when you come in. Only answer calls from Marvin. Don't turn on any faucets between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. Don't open the door for anyone, no matter who they say they are, after 10 p.m. If the door to the closet at the end of the hall is open, sleep in the library. If closed, sleep in any of the bedrooms. The gardener comes at midnight. If he starts knocking on the windows, hide. Turn the TV on and let it play on static through the night. Do not forget to do this. Help yourself to anything in the fridge. I'll pay you in the morning. Good night." I made sure to follow all the rules. To be honest, I was beginning to regret my decision. But since I was already there and getting paid, I decided to stay. As long as I followed the rules, I figured I would be fine. Still, the situation felt bizarre. Was this some kind of haunted house? Nevertheless, I lounged around for a few hours, planning to go to bed around 9, as that's when the strange occurrences would begin. At 8:50, I brushed my teeth, using the faucet one last time before 9. I checked the closet in the hallway. It was open. So I moved my stuff into the library and prepared to sleep on the couch. I locked the doors, just in case, and lay down, scrolling through my phone. I hadn't received any more messages from Jack, so I started to imagine reasons why he had such peculiar rules in his house. I must have dozed off because at exactly 10:16 p.m., the doorbell rang. I was about to get up, but then I remembered the rule. Don't open the door for anyone, no matter who they say they are, after 10 p.m. I stayed on the couch, trying not to make a sound, paranoid that they would hear even the slightest noise. "It's the police. Open up." I didn't move. "Hello, it's the police. Open up, or we're coming in." I still didn't move, though my heart was pounding in my chest. There was silence for a while. Then the doorbell rang again. "Hey, it's Jack. Let me in." It sounded like Jack, but I still didn't get up. He would have a key, wouldn't he? Why would he need me to let him in? "Okay, sweetheart, let me in. Don't make me angry." The voice was no longer that of Jack, but it was still somewhat familiar. I was terrified, staring at the door from across the house, praying they would go away. I stayed huddled on the couch for about half an hour before I finally got up to check if they had left. I looked through the peephole, but no one was there. I checked the time, 10:53. I was about to head back to the library when I heard a noise coming from the back of the house, like someone tapping on a window. I peeked around the corner and saw a figure outside, knocking on the glass. I ducked behind the wall. My heart was racing as I texted Jack, who responded immediately. "Hide." That single word sent chills down my spine, but I did as I was told, tucking myself into the back of a kitchen cupboard. I heard knocking on windows around the house, followed by footsteps in the garden. The noises continued for what felt like hours, though it was probably only about 15 minutes. I felt sick to my stomach, curled up in the cabinet, my head resting on my knees. Suddenly, The noises stopped, and everything was silent. I waited for what felt like an eternity before crawling out and checking my phone. I had a message from Jack. "Good job. You can leave in the morning." That's exactly what I did. I left as soon as the sun began to rise. I didn't even bother to gather my things. I just grabbed my keys and ran. A cold chill ran down my spine. The house. The same house where all of this had started. The one with the strange rules and the unsettling occurrences. I didn't want to go back, but I knew I had no choice. If I didn't do this, he would never leave me alone. I would never be free. That night, I drove back to the house. The journey felt like a descent into madness, every mile bringing me closer to something I didn't fully understand. When I finally arrived, the house loomed before me, dark and silent. I parked my car and got out, feeling the weight of the envelope still in my pocket. The night was eerily quiet, with only the sound of my footsteps echoing through the empty street. As I approached the front door, I reached for the key under the blue flower pot, just like before. My hand shook as I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was just as I remembered it, but something felt different, darker, more foreboding. I closed the door behind me and locked it, the click of the bolt sounding ominous in the stillness. I walked through the house, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Everything was in its place, yet I felt like I was being watched. I made my way to the living room, where a single candle flickered on the coffee table. Beside the candle was another note, folded neatly. I picked it up and unfolded it, my hands trembling. "Go to the basement." I didn't even know the house had a basement. The thought of going down there filled me with dread, but I knew I had no choice. I had come this far, and there was no turning back. I found the door to the basement at the end of the hallway, partially hidden behind a curtain. I hesitated, then opened it, revealing a steep set of stairs descending into darkness. Taking a deep breath, I started down the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. The air grew colder the further I descended, and the smell of damp earth filled my nostrils. At the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a large, dimly lit room. The walls were lined with old wooden shelves, filled with jars and boxes covered in dust. In the center of the room stood a single wooden chair, facing a large mirror that reflected the flickering light of a nearby lantern. On the chair sat a man. He was slumped over, his hands tied behind his back, a hood covering his head. My breath caught in my throat as I realized who it was. Jack. There was no response. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached out to touch him, his body slumped forward, revealing the hood had been tied too tightly around his neck. Jack was dead. I stumbled back, horrified, my mind reeling. What was happening? Why had I been brought here? Suddenly, the lantern flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. I heard the creak of the door at the top of the stairs, followed by footsteps descending slowly, deliberately. I wasn't alone. Panic surged through me, and I backed away, searching for an escape. But the footsteps were getting closer, the sound of them echoing in the confined space. In the darkness, I felt a hand grab my arm, cold and unyielding. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the suffocating darkness. And then, everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the cold basement floor, my head throbbing with pain. I blinked, trying to focus, but everything was blurry. Slowly, my vision cleared, and I saw the figure standing over me. It was the man in the black suit, the one who had given me the envelope. He was holding something in his hand, something that glinted in the dim light. "You're awake," he said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, and no sound came out. I could only watch as he knelt down beside me, holding up the object in his hand, a syringe filled with a strange, glowing liquid. "This is your final favor," he said, leaning closer. "After this, you'll never hear from Jack again. You'll never have to worry about anything ever again." I struggled, trying to get away, but my body felt heavy and unresponsive. He grabbed my arm and plunged the syringe into my vein, the liquid burning as it entered my bloodstream. As the world around me began to fade, the last thing I saw was his cold, expressionless face, watching me with dispassionate eyes. And then everything went dark once more. Darkness enveloped me, consuming every sense, every thought. I wasn't sure if I was dead or just drifting in a void of nothingness. Time had no meaning here. I couldn't move, couldn't feel, couldn't even tell if I was breathing. It was as if I had been erased from existence. But slowly, faint glimmers of awareness began to seep in, like rays of sunlight piercing through thick clouds. I became aware of a distant, rhythmic sound, steady, unrelenting. It took me a while to recognize it as my own heartbeat, growing louder and more distinct with each passing moment. With that recognition came pain. A dull, throbbing ache spread through my body, as if I had been hit by a truck. My limbs felt heavy and numb, and my head pounded with every beat of my heart. It was a struggle to open my eyes, but eventually, I managed to crack them open just enough to see. I was lying in a bed, the sheets rough against my skin. The room was dimly lit, the walls painted a sterile white, with a single small window that let in a weak beam of light. A hospital room. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air, sharp and cold. I tried to move, but my muscles protested, stiff and uncooperative. With great effort, I turned my head to the side, wincing at the pain that shot through my neck. There was a machine next to the bed, beeping softly, monitoring my vitals. An IV drip was attached to my arm, the bag slowly dispensing fluid into my veins. I struggled to piece together how I had ended up here. The last thing I remembered was the man in the black suit, the syringe, the burning sensation as the liquid entered my bloodstream. And then, nothing, just darkness. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. I tensed, my heart racing, as a figure entered the room. It was a nurse, her expression kind but professional. She smiled when she saw I was awake. "Good to see you're up," she said, her voice soothing. "You've been out for a while." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and raw. The nurse noticed and quickly brought a cup of water with a straw. Holding it to my lips, I sipped gratefully, the cool liquid easing the discomfort in my throat. Where am I? I finally managed to croak out, my voice weak. "You're in a private clinic," the nurse replied, adjusting the IV line. "You were brought in 2 days ago. You were in pretty bad shape, but you're stable now. You need to rest." 2 days? I had been unconscious for 2 days. My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. A private clinic? Who had brought me here? As if reading my thoughts, the nurse continued. "A man brought you in. He didn't leave his name, but he made sure you were taken care of. He paid for everything up front and left specific instructions for your care." A cold chill ran down my spine. The man in the black suit. It had to be him. But why would he bring me here? Why keep me alive? "Did he say anything else?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. The nurse shook her head. "No, he just wanted to make sure you were looked after. He left a note though, said to give it to you when you woke up." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper, handing it to me. My hand shook as I took it, unfolding it slowly. The note was short, written in the same neat handwriting I had come to dread. "You're free now. Don't try to find me. You won't like what you discover." I stared at the words, my mind reeling. Free. After everything that had happened, after the fear, the manipulation, the nightmare I had lived through, he was just letting me go. It didn't make any sense. But as much as I wanted answers, I knew that seeking them would only lead to more danger. Whatever this man, this organization was involved in, it was far beyond anything I could handle. I had been lucky to survive this far. I crumpled the note in my hand, closing my eyes as exhaustion washed over me. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. I had been given a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. As I lay back against the pillows, the beeping of the machine next to me lulling me into a fitful sleep, I made a silent vow. I would move on. I would leave this nightmare behind and never look back. Whatever secrets Jack and his mysterious associates held, they would remain buried in the darkness where they belonged. And as for me, I would find a way to live in the light again.